Okay, it's 11 o'clock. Good morning. My name is Ben Bingle, and I'm the director of the DeKalb County Nonprofit Partnership at the DeKalb County Community Foundation. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on sexual harassment, recognition, reporting, and prevention. Today's training is being offered collaboratively between the DeKalb County Nonprofit Partnership, the DeKalb Chamber of Commerce, the Genoa Area Chamber of Commerce, Safe Passage, the Sandwich Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Sycamore Chamber of Commerce. So thank you to those incredible partners for coming together and working with us on this training. And Zoom is a great format for all of the, considering all of those partners from Sandwich all the way up to Genoa. So we hope this is convenient for you today. Speaking of Zoom, a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. First, we're going to be recording today's webinar, and that recording will be sent to you along with the slides. We also have everyone muted, but feel free to use Q&A and the chat features that are built into Zoom. We'll save a little bit of time at the end if you do have any questions. Finally, we'll send a certificate of participation to everyone who's attending live right now. Our plan is to send those by Friday at noon. It will be a mass email, and as most of you know, sometimes those can end up in your junk or spam folders, so keep an eye on those folders. This will be a separate email from those that we send in our follow-up email after today's training. Again, the follow-up email later on today will include the recording and the slides, and then give us a little bit more time on getting those certificates distributed. So with that, we're eager to get started, and we're excited to feature Beth Gagnon as today's presenter. Beth joined Safe Passage in 2021 as a prevention specialist. She currently serves as a long-term project manager and previously worked in human resources at the city of Sycamore. She's also worked at Adventure Works in DeKalb and Opening Doors in Dubuque, Iowa. She has a bachelor's in public relations and sociology from Loras College. Welcome, Beth. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Ben. Hello, everyone. It is really nice to see you all today. Today, we are going to do our sexual harassment prevention training. Again, Ben kind of explained all of the details of how you will get your certificate. And of course, you'll get a recording of this in the slides. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about what Safe Passage does. Oh, if it lets me change my slide. There we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Safe Passage does. Again, that is where I work currently. Safe Passage is DeKalb County's only domestic violence and sexual assault crisis center. Right now, our director of prevention is pending. We have hired someone for that position. Her name is Nia, but she is not starting just quite yet. She'll be starting as of next week. But if you need anything from Safe Passage or would like to talk to myself or anyone else at Safe Passage about these things, or about if you have any complaints for sexual harassment, anything like that, please feel free to call our 24/7 hotline. That number is 815-756-5228. My extension, if you're ever looking for me, is 129. We also have a text line. I know that sometimes making phone calls can be a little bit stressful. I know that I still don't even like calling the doctor's office. So texting sometimes is a lot easier, and it's also completely confidential. And our text line is 815-393-1995. If you're unfamiliar, there's a lot of different things we do here at Safe Passage. We have emergency and long-term shelter. I am the program manager for that long-term shelter program as well. We also do counseling for domestic violence and sexual assault. We have legal and medical advocacy, professional trainings and prevention education, which is what we are doing today. We have abuse intervention services, case management, and 24/7 crisis support. And I also always like to make sure to tell people that this is for anyone of any gender identity, including our emergency shelter. We are not just a women's shelter. We help anyone of any gender identity. So that is a little bit about Safe Passage and what we do. So today, what we're going to go over is obviously sexual harassment training. This is something you have to do every year. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with some of the topics we're going to talk about today. But the first thing is we're going to kind of understand the legal definitions. So this is kind of the legal mumbo jumbo that we have to go over. But after that, I am going to go into some real world examples. I think it makes it a little bit easier to understand those legal kind of terms and the legal things that we all have to understand. Part 3 is that we're going to talk about the impact of sexual harassment and how it kind of impacts those individuals around us. Part 4 is I'm going to share some resources and how to report. So I'm going to talk about exactly what you do if you're noticing this happening in your office or if this is happening to you. And part 5 is I'm going to talk about bystander intervention. So I'm going to talk about how you can kind of call other people out if you see this happening around you, kind of just making our workplace environment safer for everybody to be in. So I'm going to talk about why this matters really, really quickly. Like I said, I know all of you do this every single year. I'm sure you roll your eyes when you hear you have to do sexual harassment training, but this does really, really matter for making our community and environment safer. So first of all, this reduces turnover. I'm sure many of you have been impacted by the Great Resignation, as they are calling it, where there has been very, very high turnover rates, and it's been really hard to hire individuals for positions. So if we make our workplaces safer, we're actually reducing some of that turnover that we're seeing a lot of nowadays, which I know will make everyone's jobs and lives easier. Also, we're improving productivity. If you feel safe in your workplace and you feel like you can kind of thrive and be yourself in your workplace, then you're able to actually think about what you're doing. If you feel unsafe in your workplace, you kind of in the back of your mind are thinking about how you feel unsafe and thinking about, oh my gosh, what if this person comes up and talks to me? And then you're not able to actually work on what you're supposed to be working on. You're not actually able to be productive. So this again helps kind of the community of the workplace. Also reducing liability risks and costs. This is mostly for management, but again, sometimes there's some liability risks and some costs there if we're allowing a workplace environment to be unsafe. Also, I always like to say that it's just the right thing to do. I think that we need to raise the bar higher than just saying, oh, our workplace, we just make money, whatever. I think we need to raise the bar higher than that and make our workplaces also safe and comfortable for people. So yeah, it's also just the right thing to do. So that's kind of why we're here today and why this matters so much. Again, I know people roll their eyes, oh, sexual harassment training, but it is really, really important for keeping us all safe and making our communities safer. So who does harassment affect? Sexual harassment, like other forms of abuse, can affect anybody. So I think that when we think of who is affected by sexual harassment, we think of the movies, and it's always like young white women in the movies that are being affected by this. But anyone can be affected by sexual harassment. It can be someone who's really tall, it can be someone who's a male, it can be someone who's really old, someone who's really young. So basically this harassment is born out of power differentials. So just because you're a woman or not, or you're young or not, doesn't mean that you're always in a place of power or not, right? So this is based on individuals where if you're in a supervisor position, you automatically have some power over other individuals. Also, marginalized populations, especially staff and clients with intersecting identities, face increased rates of harassment and difficulty reporting. So that's another kind of level of someone else having power over another individual, which can make it really, really hard to report and make it more likely that someone's being harassed. So harassment can really affect anybody, anybody who has maybe a different power differential than another person. And those power differentials aren't always born out of workplace power differentials, like management versus the employees. Sometimes it's white employees harassing employees of color, right? Or someone who's older harassing a younger individual. Sometimes it's a male individual harassing a female individual, making them do female, what they think are female work duties, right? So any kind of power differential, whether it's workplace based or more societal and intersectionality based. Okay, now we're going to move on to the legal mumbo jumbo. So the Illinois and federal laws against sexual harassment. So sexual harassment is any unwelcome sexual advances or requests for sexual favors or conduct of a sexual nature. So basically it's things that are unwelcome, So, and I like to say that very quickly, something that's welcome can turn into unwelcome. So something that may have been okay at first can turn into not okay, and it's really important that we're consistently checking in with people. Submission to such conduct is explicitly or implicitly made a term or condition of employment. So if any of this conduct is banking on a promotion, or that you get to keep your job, or that you get to get the hours you want, anything like that, that is considered sexual harassment. Or submission to or rejection of such conduct is used as a basis for making decisions about your employment. Again, maybe if you don't do this, you're not going to get the hours you want. Or if you don't do this, now you're not going to get that promotion. Or if you don't do this, now you get to have cleanup duty when no one likes cleanup duty. And lastly, such conduct interferes with your job performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So sometimes this is things as simple as another individual has like a sexy fireman calendar in their cubicle, and it makes you feel uncomfortable because you're like, why do you have that at work? So things like that's creating a hostile work environment for you, and probably other individuals, because you're at work. Why would you have that at work? So it doesn't always necessarily have to be those physical actions. Sometimes it's jokes people make, things they have in their office, posters they have, anything like that, that can also make this hostile, intimidating, or offensive work environment. So all of those things are considered sexual harassment under Illinois and federal law. There are two kind of forms of sexual harassment, and we're going to go over both of those in some detail. But the first form is quid pro quo. I think quid pro quo, ooh, what a mouthful. I think that one is the most common form that we think of. It's shown a lot in movies. So when we go over that, I think that's the one you're going to think of off the top of your head. It's this for that. Hostile work environment is the other form. This one is a little bit harder to catch, I think, and it's a little bit more vague. There's a lot of different ways it can happen, so that's why we're going to definitely go over that one in detail as well. I kind of talked about that a little bit, but it's whenever we make the work environment not safe for people. And so both of those are forms of sexual harassment under the Illinois and federal law. Okay, so now we're going to go into kind of those real world examples and more in detail about the two different types. So we're going to explain some of those laws in less legal mumbo jumbo. So quid pro quo is a request for sexual favors in exchange for employment or advancement. So it literally translates to this for that. So if you do this sexual favor for me, I'll give you a promotion. If you do this sexual favor for me, you get to keep your job. If you do this sexual favor for me, then you get to be point person on this project. So it is quite literally this for that. Again, this is the one we see a lot in the movies. There are some high profile cases. Harvey Weinstein, I think, is the one that the most people think of when we think of quid pro quo. Harvey Weinstein basically was, big top tier individual, and was requesting quid pro quo agreements from his staff. And there was a really big court case about it. So if you want to think of a real world example of quid pro quo, it's probably Harvey Weinstein is the one that most of us think of. So that this for that. Again, this is the easiest one to prove because, well, not prove, but it's kind of the easiest one that we think of where we're like, oh, that's definitely sexual harassment. This next one, though, some people don't believe it's sexual harassment, or it's a little bit harder for people to take it seriously. But this one is more common. We see this one more often than quid pro quo. This next one is the hostile work environment. So basically, this is unwanted sexual conduct, even without a quid pro quo threat. And it creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So I kind of talked about this earlier, is that we want to keep our environment safe for people. This one is definitely a little bit harder to kind of pinpoint as sexual harassment. Some examples of this are unwanted sexual attention. So maybe this is someone asking you out over and over and over again, even though you say no. Maybe this is someone making comments about your body when you come into work, making comments about how you look. Maybe this is someone making jokes, like sexual jokes around you. So it's that sexual attention that makes you feel uncomfortable. Again, it's unwanted. So like I said, very quickly, welcome behavior can turn into unwelcome behavior, especially if someone kind of crosses a line. Next is gender hostility. So this is sexist harassment. So this could be that we make the woman in the office get coffee for everybody and make coffee. Or we make the woman in the office do cleaning chores. Or we make the man in the office do all of the heavy lifting, right? So it's where we're making these work duties based around someone's sex, right? Next is gender policing. So this is around that gender hostility. So maybe we're saying that women have to wear skirts. They're not allowed to wear pantsuits. Or that men aren't allowed to wear skirts and they have to wear pantsuits, right? So we're policing someone's gender and how they express their gender identity. Again, this does not require a quid pro quo threat. So we're not saying like you have to do this or you're fired. Maybe we're just making it an expectation, or we're making someone feel uncomfortable if they don't do this or if they don't play along with this. So those are some basics of the two kind of ways that we have a hostile work environment. So unwanted sexual attention, that first way we have a hostile work environment, can look like unwanted touching or groping, right? Sexual comments or compliments. Sometimes people phrase it as a compliment, but it makes you really uncomfortable. Like, oh, your body looks so nice today. If someone said that to me, I'd be like, that's a weird thing to say. Like, it's one thing to be like, oh, did you get your hair cut? That looks nice. It's another thing to say, oh, your body looks nice. That's kind of, we're getting that line of I'm uncomfortable. That's weird. Asking inappropriate questions or sharing inappropriate stories or jokes. I think the inappropriate jokes is the one that we see a lot of. Asking inappropriate questions, especially for individuals who are not, like individuals who are transgender. A lot of times people will ask very inappropriate questions, like where are you in transition, and so on and so forth. And asking about someone's genitalia is never okay. So that is a very inappropriate question to ask in the work environment. Sharing sexual images or videos. So if we're sharing things around the office, even if it's not of another coworker, even if it's like just sexual, like I said, the sexy fireman poster, right? That's not appropriate to have at work. Even if you might think it's kind of funny and whatever, not everyone thinks that. So, those things are more things that you're going to keep at home and not bring into a professional environment. Sexual banter or flirtation, like I said, that person who always flirts with you and makes you, even though you've turned them down, it makes you really uncomfortable. Or the fact that you feel like even if you don't turn them down, but you feel uncomfortable, that is still a hostile work environment. Not everyone's comfortable with turning people down at work because they don't want to make it awkward. They don't want to have it ruin something with work. So the fact that you feel uncomfortable at all is still a hostile work environment. So the sexist harassment, some examples of that are sexist behaviors that are not necessarily sexual in nature. So asking people of only one gender to take notes or make coffee, right? Like I said, if you're always having the one lady in the office make coffee, that's sexist. Derogatory comments towards working mothers, right? So it's like, shouldn't you be with your kids, or don't your kids miss you? That is extremely sexist, and basically saying that you don't believe that a mother could be working. Sexist nicknames like sweetheart, hun, honey. So in a professional environment, we should be referring to our coworkers in a professional way. Using first names, if you're in a kind of work where you use last names. So we should be referring to our coworkers in a professional manner. like I said, welcome can become unwelcome very, very quickly. So if you have a coworker who is like a little old lady and she calls everyone sweetheart, and that's something that you all are okay with and it's welcome, that is one thing. This is the unwelcome behavior that's making you feel uncomfortable. So if there is an older gentleman, I once had an older gentleman who I worked with who would always call me sweetie. That made me feel kind of uncomfortable. It felt like he wasn't taking me seriously because I was young. So that's a point where we are now having the hostile work environment because I wasn't feeling comfortable with the situation. So that welcome versus unwelcome. And like I said, very quickly, welcome can turn into unwelcome. All right. So gender policing, I talked a little bit about this earlier, but reinforcing traditional gender norms in the workplace. So policing appearance. Like I said, if you're forcing women in the office to wear skirts, if you're forcing men in the office to wear pants, things like that. Gendered nicknames, invasive questions. We talked a little bit about that. And assigning jobs by gender. I have heard before that, this is a story I heard when I was giving this training, but basically there was a male nurse and he said that all of the other nurses would force him to push the gurneys because he was a man, and he didn't feel like it was fair because they all have the ability to push these gurneys and it's really hard work, but they all have the ability to, and now he's having to do it just because he's a male in the workplace. So it goes back and forth, right? That's not fair to that individual to have to be always pushing the gurneys. So that's something that we have some of that, assigning jobs based on gender. So next, we'll talk about some unwanted behaviors. So sexual conduct becomes sexual harassment when the behavior is unwelcome. I've talked about this over and over again. So sometimes there are welcome behaviors. So maybe, like I said, there's that little old lady in your office who calls everybody sweetie, right? Sometimes that can be welcome, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, that's so sweet. Or maybe you and your office buddy always make this one joke, right? But very quickly, we can have things become from welcome to unwelcome. And that is when we have a problem. So with the unwanted behavior that is unwelcome, uninvited, or undesirable is that unwanted behavior. And so consent can be revoked at any time. So just because you and your work buddy always make these jokes, whatever, and then maybe your work buddy starts making the jokes more and more serious, okay, just because you were okay with it before does not mean that you have to always be okay with it. It does not mean that you're always consenting. I like to say that consent is continuous. So at any point, you can say, okay, I'm no longer okay with this. It kind of passed a line for me, right? So you are able to revoke consent at any time. And that's really, really important to remember. It's also important to remember your coworkers can revoke consent at any time. So just checking in with your coworkers, like, hey, is this still cool? Like, does it bother you that I call you sweetie? Is this okay? Stuff like that. So just checking in with other people is really important, just to make sure the work environment's safe for everybody. So we've talked about our legal definitions. We've gone into some real world examples. And so next I'm going to talk about what you can do if you experience or witness unwanted sexual conduct. Okay. So if you experience, witness, or become aware of unwelcome sexual conduct, know that you have the right to tell the person to stop, and you have the right to report the sexual harassment. And both of these things are protected from retaliation. So if they continue the behavior or retaliate against you because you ask them to stop, they can be found to have violated the law by engaging in sexual harassment or retaliation. So as a part of that law, there are protections against individuals who report. So like the company can't fire you for reporting, so on and so forth. There's a lot of protections for individuals who report these things. So the employer's responsibility to your employees is supervisors and members of management are responsible for knowing that employee, sorry, just let me move my little box of faces. Supervisors and members of management are responsible for knowing the employer's internal compliant investigation and resolution procedure. Supervisors can help affect immediate positive change. So it's important that all supervisors and managers are aware of the procedures and how you report these things. It's also important to know that supervisors can affect like immediate change by maybe they do some mediation, maybe they pull in that employee and talk to them. So knowing that you have the power as a supervisor or a manager to make your workplace more safe by being proactive about this, right? We're talking to our employees about this. We're reminding our employees that we want this to be a safe environment. You're investigating when you hear things, you're getting your HR people involved. So just knowing that employers do have a responsibility to this and that they should be trying to make the work environment safer. Human resources or other designated sexual harassment reporting officers can work with management to investigate and resolve sexual harassment complaints. So I do recommend that if you are a supervisor and you hear about any of this, that you refer to your human resource individuals in your company. If your company is too small to have an actual human resource person, sometimes talking to someone who's even above you, talking with someone who is also a supervisor but on the same level, just to make sure that your unconscious biases are not getting involved here. But also please maintain the confidentiality and the confidence of the person who has reported to you. It's really important that we're maintaining those confidences, that it's not spreading all over the office, right? So human resource individuals are really the best to go to because they know how to maintain that confidentiality. They know how legally we're supposed to be working with individuals and what we are supposed to be doing in that case. But also educate yourself on that. Ask your human resource person what you should do. So this option may be preferred if the perpetrator of the sexual harassment is a supervisor or a manager. Sometimes starting with a human resource person, that person may not be fit to manage if we are having issues like that, especially over and over again. So just keep that in mind that sometimes there is an easy resolution and sometimes there's not an easy resolution. So just keep in mind that it depends on the situation. Sometimes it's as innocent as, sorry, I didn't mean to call you sweetie. I've never done that before. It just slipped out, you know, and then we are able to move on from there. But sometimes it's this Harvey Weinstein kind of situation where you should not be in this workplace anymore at all. So it really depends on the situation and depends on both parties and how the management handles this. So if you are reporting abuse, these are some important numbers to know. Again, the slides will be sent out for this presentation. But there is the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And that is their kind of hotline number on there. There's also the Illinois Sexual Harassment and Discrimination Hotline. So that is their number on there. The Illinois Department of Human Resources, that's their website. And then Safe Passage. So you can call us at any time. Again, we are completely confidential. So if you just want to talk about what happened a little bit, or maybe you can say, hey, I saw this in the workplace. Is this actually sexual harassment? Do I need to do something about this? We can answer those questions for you, again, completely anonymously. We don't ask for your name. And we also have our website. Again, we also have that text line I talked about in the beginning, which can make things easier. Also totally confidential. We don't ask for your name. Also, if you're not sure about the process for reporting, the EEOC and the Illinois Sexual Harassment and Discrimination Hotline can tell you kind of that process for reporting if you're taking a more, I would always say talk to your supervisor first, see what they have to say, see if they can resolve it for you. And then obviously, if they're not taking it seriously, I really encourage you to report it with the EEOC or the Illinois Sexual Harassment and Discrimination Hotline. Again, it makes your work environment safer, and you have the right to report those things. You have a right to be safe in your work environment, and nobody should have to experience sexual harassment in the workplace. So you have a right to feel safe. So you can report sexual harassment internally, like I just said, through HR. So some considerations for staff is chain of command for reporting. So sometimes they want you to do supervisor and then HR. Sometimes they want you just to go straight to HR with these things. Maybe if it's your supervisor who's harassing you, maybe you want to just go straight to HR, right? You're not going to go to your supervisor. And again, you have protections from retaliation. So there are protections out there that are specifically there to protect you from the company, your supervisor, your coworkers, anybody from retaliating against you for saying something. And remember, reports are a chance to fix a problem. You're helping, you're not hurting your organization by making a report. Again, the goal is to make our workplaces safer for everybody. And when our workplaces are safer, we have less turnover, people are more productive, it's a happier, healthier environment and place, which then leads to our communities being healthier and happier, right? So you're not hurting your organization by saying something, you're making it better. So this is a chance to fix an issue. So I would always say it's really important to report these things when they happen. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about bystander intervention. So this is how you can, if you're an outside person, so maybe you're witnessing sexual harassment of other individuals, this is how you can kind of step up and take responsibility to help. I always like to say this is more like being an active bystander. So this is someone who's witnessing it as a bystander, but then you're taking active responsibility to help. Again, this is another way to make our environments safer. So there are 5 different ways that you can be an active bystander. The first one is direct. So direct is basically what it says it is. You are directly approaching that individual and you're saying, hey, that was messed up. That's not appropriate here. We don't do that here. And so you're taking a very direct approach. I like to say that this is a really good one to use for people you know really well, or maybe your friends, because sometimes we don't realize when we're making people uncomfortable. Nobody's perfect. Sometimes we say something and it's like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Or sometimes we say something and don't even realize that we had made someone uncomfortable. So it's nice when people are able to tell you, hey, in the future, I wouldn't say that, because this gives us a chance to learn from our mistakes. So again, like even outside the workplace, this is a great one to use for your friends, right? So none of us are perfect. Direct gives us a chance to learn from our mistakes. The next one's distract. So sometimes we don't feel necessarily comfortable intervening in a direct way in these situations. So this one, you basically kind of distract the person away from the situation to give them a chance to get away. So I like to use the example of you're on the bus and maybe someone is getting way too close to the other person on the bus. You can tell they're uncomfortable. So you pull out your phone and say, hey, can you give me directions to the person who's uncomfortable? Hey, can you come over here? And I don't know which stop it, like, is it the blue line? Is it the green line? Like, I'm not sure. So that gives the person a chance to get away from the person making them feel uncomfortable. It gives them an excuse. So you're distracting away from the situation. So that's a really good indirect way, especially if you don't feel safe directly intervening. This is a really good one for strangers. But this is also another way you're taking action, right? The third one is delay. So delay basically means that you see something happen, and then after the fact, you go up to the person who was uncomfortable and you say, hey, I saw that, that was messed up, how can I help? This does 2 things. 1, it gets the person help, right? You're offering your assistance. And 2, it validates their experience. Sometimes things happen, especially microaggressions, where we don't even we're like, wait, did I overreact? Did I hear them right? Did they mean to say it like that? Was that what they meant? So sometimes we second guess ourselves that things happened. So this validates the person's experience. It validates like, yeah, that was messed up. So just kind of knowing that someone else saw that is really, really powerful. So delay is a really great one, especially if you don't feel safe intervening in a situation. If you make yourself unsafe by intervening in a situation, that sometimes can cause more problems because now someone needs to go in and help you too. So I never want you to pick one that's going to make you unsafe. The fourth one's delegate. So this just means that you're delegating it to someone whose problem it is to care, right? They have to care about it. So if you see something going on in your workplace, go to your supervisor. It is their job. They get paid extra to deal with these things, right? That's not your job. So go to your supervisor and say, hey, I saw this person and this person, and they said some stuff and that I could tell the other person was uncomfortable. Can you take care of that? So again, you're still not doing nothing. You are bringing it to the attention of the supervisor. You're bringing it to the attention of people. So that's still another really important step you can take. And the last one is document. This is another really good one if you don't feel safe intervening. Basically, you document, maybe you write down, maybe you take a video of something happening, so then you can give it to the people later as evidence. So maybe if you notice people are making Cindy make the coffee every day, and Cindy's the only woman in the office. Well, you write down, Cindy made coffee, Cindy made coffee, Cindy made coffee. And if you get enough, like Cindy's made coffee every single day, why is Cindy the only one making coffee? Then you kind of have that evidence of like on 12/5 she made it, on 12/6 she made it, and you're keeping kind of a documentation of, okay, no, this is really happening and it is really a problem. Now we can kind of take that to the supervisor and say, Cindy's made coffee every day for 2 weeks. Why is that the case? Why is no one sharing the load of that? So those are the 5 different ways as a bystander, as someone seeing in, can kind of help. I always say, see something, say something. If you see something is happening, don't just let it go. That's how these things keep happening. That's how things get worse. Harassment keeps going because we tolerate it. We say, oh, it's fine. I'm sure some of you have maybe heard of rape culture, things like that. We believe it's just a normal part of our community and our culture. And it's not. It doesn't have to be. This is something that we're able to put a stop to. So please be an active bystander. All of these different ways are fabulous ways. And just pick the one that is appropriate for the situation that you feel the most comfortable with. So, bystander intervention, this is for like the direct approach. But when you do the direct approach, what's really important is that you name the behavior, right? We're being very clear. Hey, I noticed you're doing this. Hey, I noticed you're making sexual jokes at work. And then you set a limit to it. That's not appropriate in our workplace. That's not something that we do here, right? So, hey, I noticed you're making sexual jokes. That's not appropriate in our workplace. And then you move on, right? So like I said, sometimes we don't know we're making people uncomfortable, or sometimes we don't know things are appropriate. I know that there's a lot of, there's kids that come into the workforce straight out of college, right? It takes time to learn what's appropriate in a workplace and not. It takes time to learn how you need to hold yourself in a workplace sometimes. Or maybe it's individuals where this always used to be okay, and now it's like, maybe that was okay in the 60s, but now you know what I mean? So it's okay to then move on. Give them a chance to learn from their mistakes, give them a chance to figure it out, but be mindful, right? So we're keeping an eye on that and just making sure it doesn't happen again, because there's a difference between one slip up and a pattern. So we just want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on this. And I always like what the slide says here, that calling out harassment doesn't have to be like a big show. It doesn't have to be like a huge deal where we have like Harvey Weinstein court cases, right? If we call out the behavior before it becomes a problem, a pattern, then we're able to keep it from becoming a big deal, especially like when the person corrects it, right? So just calling it out really quickly, saying, hey, don't do that again, and then moving on can sometimes save this from becoming a pattern, can save a lot of people from being uncomfortable. So again, that's why this is so important. If you notice though that you have an employee or a colleague who's refusing to be redirected, right? Like I said, this is a pattern and they're not listening and they have not done anything and they're doing it over and over again, then maybe it's time that we move up the food chain, right? We're going to maybe go to HR about this now, or maybe we need to make a complaint, because, a slip up here and there is one thing, but when you're doing it all the time, even if you've been told a couple times, that's a pattern. That's another thing. So just making sure that we know that sometimes we may need to take that next step. But what's really important is that you're at least calling out the behavior in the first place. So, keys to success. All right, so this is how we be successful in our workplaces about creating a good environment. So, civility, creating a culture of respect. So, we're all respecting each other, right? Everyone has a right to be there. You were all hired to be there for a reason. Everyone has the right to make money. Everyone has the right to want to make a living for themselves. So just treating everybody with respect in your workplace. And then next is making reports. So abuse thrives in silence. So that's how people get away with these things. That's how things get escalated, is when nobody says anything. Because then the person thinks it's safe to do those things and that it's accepted by us. So if it's safe to do so, please make a report and help your workplace improve. Again, if it's not safe to do so, I never want you to put yourself in danger to make reports against other people. Again, there's anonymous ways to make reports, like I said earlier with that Illinois hostility hotline. There's anonymous ways to make reports about your workplace. So just making sure you're keeping yourself safe. And also being a bystander. So speak up sooner. We should be able to talk to our coworkers and things like that before these things become a really, really big problem, right? So try and say something, the second you notice it, hey, that might not be this is not really the place to do that, right? And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can just be a really quick comment and then you move on. You just keep working, going about your day, right? So those are kind of the 3 ways that we can make sure our environments are safe and we make sure that the work environment, we're actually able to work in it. So that is the gist of our presentation today. I know we want to make sure we have some time for questions if anybody has questions. So the Director of Prevention, again, is pending right now. Her name is Nia, but she has not started yet. And right there is our Safe Passage Hotline phone number, the 815-756-5228. That is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, completely confidential. And you can see in the little golden box in the bottommost right corner, our little text line number, which is 815-393-1995. We are also on all the social medias. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. So I think we are the most active on Facebook and Instagram, but you are also able to direct message us as well. It's just not as safe confidentiality wise if you direct message us, because Facebook's not like totally confidential. So I would recommend using the text line or calling us if you have any issues or concerns or anything you want to ask about. Again, if you're like not sure if this is sexual harassment and you just want to ask like, hey, if this happens, is that sexual harassment? Go ahead and call us. We can tell you. Everyone on our hotline is 60-hour domestic violence and sexual assault trained. So please feel free to call us anytime. But I will go ahead and open up the floor for questions.
Thank you, Beth. And if you do have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A or send them directly to me in the chat. We've had 2 come in so far. And the first one says, what tips do you have for small businesses without HR? We have 1 full-timer and 2 part-time. And it's a good question because I know we have a number of nonprofit organizations joining us today as well that are maybe 1-person shops.
Yeah, that is very true. When you have that small of a business, you end up not having an HR person. I believe an HR individual is not necessary until you reach 50 employees to have your own HR person. So it takes a lot to get to 50 employees. So my recommendation is, again, starting off with that, just if you see something, say something. So starting off with that, like, hey, that's not super appropriate here. This is the workplace, so can you maybe not do that? Like I said, doesn't have to be a big deal. So that's a really good place to start if you don't have an HR person, especially if it's just maybe a team of 2 or 3, just being able to call out that behavior. And then also you can still, even if it's that small of a business, you are able to make complaints anonymously to the different hotlines I shared with you all. And you still have those rights to make those complaints. So that would be some of those things that I would recommend is maybe starting off small. It's like, hey, that's not appropriate. You could even start indirectly where you put up posters in the office that talk about sexual harassment. Maybe we're trying to drop some hints. And again, if it becomes really serious and this is something you're very uncomfortable with, I would always recommend making a report because again, you're not hurting the workplace by making those reports, you're making it safer. The business can't grow if nobody wants to work there or feels comfortable working there. So that is what I would recommend if you're working with a really small business about sexual harassment.
Yeah, and would you say with those that are maybe one person, sole proprietor, small businesses or nonprofits with just an executive director, say, would you say that, that can manifest in the culture they set with their volunteers and, they might be unwillingly or kind of not aware of the culture that they're building and the hostility that might be present, even though there's no other employees there that they're working with. So would you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is kind of about the way you're presenting your business or nonprofit. So again, if it is one single employee, the way you're presenting yourself to the community, if you're perpetrating some of that, or if that's happening, that's how you present yourself to the community, right? Again, you're not going to have that opportunity to grow. Your business might drop down. The nonprofit world, there's funding that's involved. You want people to donate to your cause. You want people to volunteer. So if you are not creating a good work environment, then there's, again, those innate consequences of maybe people don't want to volunteer because they feel they would rather volunteer elsewhere because they don't feel comfortable. Or maybe people don't want to help your business and help buy items and do things like that because they felt uncomfortable. And actually, what's really, really interesting for marketing strategies is the #1 marketing strategy that works and is the cheapest is word of mouth. So people talk and people talk about your business, people talk about your nonprofit. And if something starts going around that you made someone feel uncomfortable or something's unsafe, that gets around quickly. And that is your #1 marketing strategy is going to be word of mouth. It's the best one that you can go with. So that is definitely something you're going to want to keep an eye on and just making sure you're making people feel comfortable, even if you're of one, right? And also not allowing volunteers and funders to treat you poorly. Sometimes you may be an executive director of one for your nonprofit and volunteers treat you poorly or funders treat you poorly. That quid pro quo of I won't donate to you if you do not do this or that. And that is also reportable. So it does not have to be just employee to employee.
Thanks, Beth. We had a question here about employees that were not able to attend live. They're wondering if the recording can satisfy the state's requirement. Our response to that is the DCNP, the Community Foundation, will be sending those certificates of participation to everyone who attended live. Now, if you have employees within your organization who view this later, my understanding is that is perfectly fine. You would just need another way to document that they attended the training and participated in the training. So that may be as simple as, some sort of documentation that you add to their employee file or something like that. But for our purposes, the certificates that we send will only send those to those attending live right now, because we can't verify that individual goes on and watches the recording later. So thanks for that question. Good clarifying point. We have another question here that says, what if the sexual harassment is coming from another business, organization's owner, worker, board, or volunteer? What should one do?
Again, I will let you know that if it's from another business, if it's from a volunteer or a donor, those are also things that are able to be reported. So those are still against the law. And so you are able to report those things. And again, I mean, if it's another business and it's an employee of that business, maybe talking to the supervisor of that employee might be also another way to kind of go about that.
Okay. The final question we've received says, can you elaborate on how supervisors and managers can effectively do our part when someone comes to us reporting sexual harassment?
So I would say that for supervisors and managers, the best way that you can kind of interact with an employee who's bringing a concern to you is I would talk a little bit to if you have an HR department about this, because some vary, but always believing them, right? It's hard for someone to come forward and talk about this stuff. So we want to make sure that we always like say, I believe you, and we're believing that individual. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard the term start by believing. So as a supervisor and a manager, it's really important that we believe that person and validate their experience. And then based on the severity level, if it's a very, very severe kind of complaint, we may recommend that that person calls the hotline, and maybe you can help them make that claim. Or maybe this is something where you're pulling in the other person, you're talking to them about it. Again, getting your HR department involved might be helpful. But again, we're just validating that person's experience. We are taking maybe some of our normal disciplinary actions. Maybe there's write-ups, there's warnings, and we're having a very serious conversation with the other individual about that kind of behavior.
Great, thank you, Beth, and thank you all for attending today. There is another question in the Q&A about the certificates. So again, you should expect to receive 2 emails from us as a follow-up, one with the recording and slides from today's presentation, and the other with the certificate of participation for all who attended live. We encourage you to monitor your spam and junk folders in case those emails are filtered from your inbox, but our goal is to send those certificates by Friday at noon. For those of you representing nonprofit organizations, you can visit dcnp.org for upcoming opportunities. We just launched our 2023 membership drive, and you can renew or become a DCNP member on the website. And if you're a chamber member, I know that they're coming up on member renewal season as well. So a soft reminder for membership renewal across the board. I want to thank all of the chambers who partnered with us on this presentation, and once again, thank all who participated. One more time, a big thank you goes to Beth Gagnon for sharing her time and expertise with all of us today. Take care and happy holidays.